Hello, hello, hello. So for today's class, basically I'm going to just show you how to make a class and how to test it. And for the class, basically a class is a collection of data and functions, or classes are called methods, for accessing data. If you're familiar with the C programming language, it's same as a struct. So basically a class has four parts. You're going to have what's called the properties, constructors, what the book calls mutators, but generally they're more often called getters and setters, or accessors in the book. And then the last part is kind of mutators. But basically, it's just other functions that kind of do it. So properties are generally in two types. I like to make all my properties in a protected format. So I'll say protected. And so for this, we're going to build just a very basic structure similar to what you're going to have to do in your assignment. We'll make a basically an employee record. So we'll have int employee number, and then you can actually initialize them in here. So if you initialize them here and you don't declare them, you don't actually define them in the constructor, it will automatically do it for you here. So I got employee number, employee name, and while I'm typing this out, there's basically three types of protections. There's or permissions on a property for a function. There's private, which can only be accessed within the class. Public, which can be accessed by anybody, and then protected can be accessed within the class, but also within any subclasses. So when we go over polymorphism and inheritance later in the semester, you can see how those values will be considered private in any subclasses that you have. Oh, this should be string. And then I'll just have one called string, and this will be job. And then so what the constructor will do is build this. Now the one thing I really like about Eclipse is if you right-click on it in a window, you have tons of options to help you fix something, and you won't probably be able to see it very easily on the screen. But down here on the bottom, so if you right-click on this thing, and then select source, and then you do constructor using fields, you can see all the fields that you construct, and then where you want to put it. So I'm going to put it after job. So I'm going to bring in all the variables and put them in a constructor. So now I made a constructor that has all the values. And so whenever I build a class, I always have two constructors I want to do. I have one that has basically every value, and then I'm going to make another one that has none of the values. And so if you look at this, so super what it'll basically do is initialize the class that this inherits from. So this is inherited from anything, and this does nothing, but Eclipse puts it in here and doesn't really slow down your code. And then notice how it will basically give the names and then pass them in, and then we have, for objects, we have the this. So this refers to the properties within the class. So this is a passed-in parameter, and this will be signed to this value here. Now in this empty class, these default values will be assigned to employee num, employee name, employee name, and job. And so sometimes I make multiple constructors, but I always have at least these two. This is nice to have if you want an empty one, and this is nice to have when you have all the values, you just want to store them. So again, you can't access these values directly, and so since they're protected, which is similar to private, what we can do is now do getters and setters. So I'm going to right-click this again, do source, and then select generate getters and setters. And I'm just going to make one for each one, but you have the option to only do get and set. Sometimes you only want to be able to like get the value, and so you have that option here. And so this will build them all, and then I like to keep them parameterized within the little comments I have here. So I have now all the getter setters for all these variables. And then the mutate, I'll call those mutators, not mutations, are basic values that allow you to modify the data. And so say, I want to say, I don't know, you can do like toString, which is also built in here. Yeah, so I'll make it toString, so those will print out all the values. So I have all those values here, hit OK, and then put this here, and this is an accessor basically, or toString, that writes over what it would normally be and then just prints out all the values. So now what I'm going to do is, I have this nice class, but I have no way to access it. So I need to build a new function to access it. So I'm in Eclipse. I'm going to go to I'm going to right click on my class, so in this class 131, and add a new class. Now what I'm going to add for the class is I'll call this employee driver, and then I'm going to add a main here, and this should generate a main value. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to import, I think I called it class example. I should maybe have called it a better name. And actually, I forgot. Since I'm in the same package, I don't have any packages. Actually, employee driver is automatically part of this. So say I want to make a new employee driver, so I'll do employee driver. I'll call this class example. Employee equals new class example. And if you remember from before, if you took this Java stuff or have seen this, basically new does is tells the operating system, hey, allocate memory for this. So what it will do is it'll look at class example and see it has 4 values. An integer is 4 bytes or 32 bits, so it's going to allocate 3 bytes and then allocate, basically have a 64-bit processor. So each string is initially allocated with 64 bits that points to a location of that. So allocate basically 64 times 3 for the 3 strings plus 32 for the integer in memory when you do the new. And then I can also add values. So I'll do employee. And then again, the nice thing about Eclipse is it automatically fills this out. So I'll do employee, I'll do set employee number. I'll put the value, I'll do 1. I'll do employee set name, and I'll do my name, so I'll do Greg. And I'll do employee, and when you hit the dot, this is when it comes up. And then employee last name, Wagner. And then I'll do employee, I have a delusion of grandeur, so I'll do, oops. So notice here how I'm getting an error. It's because it's under protection. I need to do employee set last name. I do employee set job, and I'll do a moment of grandeur, I'll do CEO. And then if I want to print out the value, I do system.out.println, and I'll just put employee. And then if I want to run this, I'll right-click employee driver, and I'll say run as Java application, and notice it prints out all the values. So this is good and all, but say I want to make a loop out of this. So say I'm going to enter 3 employees. So I'll make a scanner. Where I'm reading in the value from the text, so it'll be system.in. Notice how I have the squiggly line underneath this, so it means it hasn't been resolved yet. So if you highlight, if you bring your in Eclipse, if you bring your marker over the value, you'll see you can import the value, and this will put the import scanner on the top there. And then, like I've said before, I like to always close it once, and then just put the values in there. So I'm going to go for loop. So first off, I'm going to say system.out.print how many employees would you like to enter? Put a little space there. And then I'll do int num employee equals scanner next int, and then I'll start reading these values. So I'll do a for loop. I know the number of employees, so I'll do int ii equals 0. Ii is less than num employee, and then colon or semicolon ii plus plus. Now sometimes you'll see this plus plus ii. With the plus plus ii, if you forgot, means it will increment the value, then run with whatever there. So basically, it's used when you try to like increase the value when it's within a an array or something like that. And so it's got a pre-increment, and then afterwards does it. You'll see this in for loops either way, but it doesn't really matter since you're not doing something within a line. But basically, if the plus plus is before the ii or whatever your incrementer is, it will increment the value before it runs everything else in the line. If it's afterwards, after the value, like it is here, it will run everything in the line, then increment the value. And very rarely does that matter, because a lot of times you just kind of use this in this loop and stuff like that. But every now and then, I've done it a few times where I want it to increment it just to save a little bit of space and look cool. And so I'll do system in. So I'll say system out print line enter the name, so the number of employee of the employee, and then I'll do scanner. I'll do int employee num equals scanner dot next int. So this gets I'm reading an integer, and then I'm going to copy and paste this and kind of just modify it. So I'm going to read in the name and the job. So I'm going to say enter the first name of the employee. So I need to change this to a string. Notice I'm not putting these values into the structure just yet. Just basically, you can directly read it in there. And maybe I'll do an example of this. And I'll say name, and so since we're doing, it's going to be next line. And then for this next one, I'll say enter the, copy and paste this, last name of the employee. And then I'll do string last name, or L name, and I'll do next line. And finally enter the job of the employee. I'll just type this, I'll do string job equals scanner. Now notice, I'm going to type this very start at the end. Now notice how I'm declaring these variables, this one, within the for loop. So since it's within these braces, the scope of these values will end once it gets out of this value. So you can't access job once you get outside of this for loop. And so now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to dynamically allocate some memory in an array. So I'll call this class example. I'll say employees equals new class example. Then in here I'll say this value. So I'll do num employee. And then I need to make this an array. And this way I can dynamically allocate memory. So this will do is make an array of however many employee numbers you've entered in here. So you always have the right size. And then I'm just going to put in here, I'll say class or employees equals new equals, and then I'll do II, so whatever increment of this here equals new class example, and then the values here. So first one's going to be employee num, and so you can check on class example. So I got the order is employee num, employee name, employee last name, and job. So employee num, name, last name, and job. And what this will do is allocate the memory and assign the values for this employee, and then put it in here. So type in the values, and then for the last thing what I'm going to do is I'll do for, and I'm going to use kind of a for each type of statement. So instead of doing something like this, if I want to iterate through all the values and I know the size, I can do something like class example. I'll call this just employee again. Actually, I can't call it employee. I have to call it. I'm going to call this imp out since I'm going to write these values out, and then colon, and then employees. Now, what this will do is iterate through every value. So the thing about this is it's kind of cool if you want to just go through all the different values through something, but you don't really have a counter, and so you kind of have to know. That's why I didn't use that value here, because I wanted to show you how to use the counter. But you can do it this way as well, and this will go through all the values and employees. And then I'll just do system.out.println, and I'll just type employee info plus imp out. So now I can run this, and then in this is the C setup for the code, but I can actually run this up here. And then if you watch my previous video where I made the debugger, I'm going to put a breakpoint here. So I'll change this to debug and then run it, and then notice how it's going to start here, and what's going on? Run it again. I don't know why this is. Let me check this again. Oh. Still running my old code. So let me kill that one. Now let me try running this. Okay, here we go. So I put a breakpoint in here. Go into the next line. So it's going to print out this information. Now it's going to say, okay, it's going to step here, so you can see what's in the value of the scanner in this case. And then here, and then, so I'll type in this. So I like checking when I'm entering values to make sure that it actually goes across. And I like using a debugger. So we'll do 2 employees. And I go to the next line, so I can check here, bring my mouse over, and I can see I have 2 employees. And also on the variable side up here, I can see what value is returned and number of employees. So this value looks good. So what this is going to do is allocate the memory. You'll see employees comes up here, and then you can check the size. So it has 2 values. Perfect. So I'm going to say enter the value. So enter the employee num. So I'll do 2. And then I'm just going to, in this case, I'm going to actually, so to step, sorry, I didn't say this to step, I'm hitting F6. But if you right click in the debugger, you can see the values. So I actually didn't show it. So I'm going to hit F8 to actually step forward. I don't know why this isn't running. Oh, I already hit enter. So I'll hit last name and I'll do Wagner. Job and I'll say CTO. And what is it going on here? Oh, so the number of employees, this one I'll do 3. And what is the problem? No. So I wasn't, let me change this up. I will change this to string employee string equals scanner dot next line, and then I will do integer dot parse int employee string, and then also what I'll do is I'm going to put a try catch around this value. And the reason why I'm doing that, I'll do int employee num equals 0. And then the reason why I'm doing the try catch is, for me, whenever I have a user or IO enter something, I always do a try catch just because I always assume that the users might do something weird. So if you want to see what error this throws, you go over it. You can see throws. So I'm going to do number format exception. And then I'll print out system.out.println number no good, assigning 0 for employee no. So let me try this. Run the debugger again. See the values. So I'm just going to hit F8. So how many employees would I like to do? I'll do 2. And again, I should probably just do the next line because this is not cooperating. So I'm going to copy and paste this line. Highlight it for me. Bring it to the larger view so you can see it a little bit better. So I'll do num employee. It's kind of confusing with employee num. Oh, no render is not doing it. So I'll do employee number and I'll do employee string. I'll do num. I don't know what's going on, but I'll take this as well. Call this num employee string. Try running it again. So how many employees I'd like to do now? I'll do 2. Enter the number of employees, so I'll do 2. And I'll do the name Kyle, my brother, Wagner, and CTO. Enter number of employees, so this will do 3. I'll do my sister's name, I'll do Nikki. And I'll do last name, Wagner. I'll call her Chief Engineer. And then notice how it prints out all the values. And so this window also might be on the bottom. I just have it minimized. So if you want to get it so it's like in the corner there, it disappears when we're not using it, if you click minimize, it'll hide it. and it's this icon here, this little computer monitor. So I hope this helps you get started with the classes stuff, and I hope you have a nice rest of your week.